My name is Daniel Godfrey. I go by Daniel S. Godfrey because there are other Dan Godfreys in the world who were composers, and I want to be sure that I'm not mistaken for one of them. I'm open to all kinds of music. I rarely have students who write the way I do. Most students I used to have, at least before I got to Northeastern, wrote in a highly aggressive, atonal, if that's the right word, or panchromatic style, and I've encouraged it. What I encourage for students is that they embrace the music they're writing in an honest way. I mean, it's important to have students experiment, I feel, with stylistic approaches and materials that they're not accustomed to if it's early in their careers, just so they know what is possible. And it's really important for them to study not only contemporary literature in the Western canon, right up to the modern serialists and, aleatoric composers, but it's also very important for them to know world music. It's very important for them to know the music of other cultures and not just sort of groove away on them, but really understand as much as they can how a lot of that music is put together. Because what I believe is that in our lifetimes we encounter the music that we love somewhere. There's some music that we listen to more than others. And if we're being honest, we have to acknowledge that that music is being integrated in some way into how we hear and how we compose. And so, inevitably, if we're really reflecting who we are and how we've processed our experience, our music is going to be, to use a word that sometimes is used derogatively, derivative. And I always encourage students to not resist being derivative because, there's good derivative and there's obvious and not particularly elegant derivative. But if it's natural and organic and it's it's an admixture or a product or a syncretism of what we have imbibed as listening musicians, and it comes out in a particular synthesis that reflects who we are and the kind of sounds and forms of expression we love, then it's fine to be derivative. And just to turn your nose up on anybody who criticizes you for being that way, because that's the honest way to be. So there are different ways that that can happen. I mean, Bill Balcom, for example, William Balcom will borrow overtly from a whole mosaic of different styles, a lot of them popular, including vaudeville and jazz and reggae and everything else that comes his way. And that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is just absorbing all of that sound and that style and that sort of cultural context, and then expressing it in whatever kind of unique admixture of sonic sensibility comes out of that very naturally in who you are. That's a perfectly decent way of doing it. It's very difficult to struggle these days with the whole idea of originality. When I was a student at Yale and thereafter, one of the things I realized, it was very difficult to communicate this to other people, but there was always a premium on doing what was new. And what I tried to communicate often is that doing something because it's new is an utterly shallow reason for doing something. There's no depth to that. There's no intellectual defense for that in a cultural context, especially. It's just a superficial aspect of what one composes if it's there. And usually it's not there because there's very little to do that hasn't already been done in some similar fashion over and over and over again at this point. And so newness by itself can be wonderful if it's arrived at because the sounds are ones that infatuate the composer, that the composer is in love with, that are part of the meat and bones of who we are. If that happens to be new, great. I've listened to a lot of music that sounds like nothing I've ever heard before, and it's as boring as can be. I've listened to music that's as different from anything I've ever heard, and it's really fascinating. So what is the difference? The difference is that one composer, it seems to me, is on an ego trip and saying, see how different I am. That's an ego trip. Why as a listener, should I care how different this person is? It doesn't matter to me. There's nothing in it that reflects my humanity or anyone else's. Another composer can do something completely new and say, wow, look at this. This is what sounds can do. This is what my brain, I mean, my brain has billions of cells. I don't know how it works. I can't pretend and orchestrate what my brain is doing, but look at this musical experience that came out of my thought process. I'd like to share this with everybody. I'm giving something. I'm not taking praise to support my ego. I'm giving something in this genuine way because it really is coming from me. That's originality, and it has nothing to do with whether the sounds are something that you've heard before or not. That's just beside the point. What's important is that it really comes from you, and you're different from everyone else, so it is going to be different somehow. And that's you being original. It originates with you. It originates with all the music you've taken in and processed and fallen in love with, and whatever the brain is doing with that to make you think intelligently and thoughtfully as a musician and let it flow with that background, then that's originality. And if somebody can pick out something that kind of sounds like this, but so it sounds like Penderecki, it sounds to me like Goretzky, who cares? It isn't Penderecki, it's you. It's not Goretzky, it's you. Whatever it is, it's you. It's not these other people. And this idea that it's derived from this or that or the other thing is just something to put aside and ignore, in my opinion.